All I can say is excellent episode of Dororo for this week. Probably one of my favorites for sure. The misfortune that was the theme of this week's episode was brilliantly explored and just raises so many questions, but also delivers quite a few answers to what's been going on with Hyakkimaru's body and why he sometimes wasn't regaining body parts back and just where the endgame truly wants to go. Starting the episode off from his brother's perspective, seeing just his villages and just areas of his land just tormented by plagues, disease, famine, all of the things that you just can't control that are just unfortunate events, and then seeing just innocent people starving to death. Blaming yourself as if you didn't do enough. If you would have killed the brother, then this might have been avoided. But now we can see the deal has basically been severed, and misfortune is coming back to bite you in the ass. And the way they go about exploring this was actually pretty painful, as you see just children with a small bit of rice, nibbling on it, and it's hard to look at because whether you like Dago or not, or you don't like the family or not, like, these are just innocent people, and it's very brutal to watch with how they explore just the hunger and just disease is kind of rotting away at the kingdom now, to then transition to a very hopeful and optimistic scene with Hyakkimaru as well as Dororo just embracing the fall season in a very beautifully lit and directed sequence. It's very tragic, it really, really is, and I was really under the impression that was kind of going to be the outcome of this episode, focusing on the land being tormented, with Hyakkimaru actually being pretty positive, as we're seeing him be a lot different than where he was in the first episode, and it didn't seem like he was being lost in rage. He almost felt like he had a purpose. Yeah, he was getting his body part back, but he wasn't being lost in demonic rage. You could consider him human with how he was at the beginning of this episode. And then everything just goes horrible. The demon in this week's episode, like chimera-looking beast, was really interesting just at a visual level, having bits and pieces of so many animals. And the idea of a man who was a coward and ran away for his own life, not protecting his mother's, to then eventually just getting lost in sorrow and rage to the point that he got corrupt, to then just starting to feed people to this demon. It's a really interesting story, but where it goes really interesting is where you see Hyakkimaru go. I mean, once he starts to acknowledge and recognize that he might be losing Dororo, I absolutely adore just the hopelessness of the situation of after they fall to what seems to be their death, and Dororo's arm is pretty much under rocks that, a body that doesn't have real arms can't do much about, and someone who can't see, can't really tell what's going on, is just beating his head against a rock to the point that it felt hopeless. I was like, what is truly going to happen here? Are they actually going to go the full route of killing off Dororo and really setting Hyakkimaru off on the deep end? And if it wasn't for the priest coming in the nick of time, like, who knows what would have happened there? And this is where it all kind of tips the scales, because this is a man who was hopeful, he was optimistic, to then seeing that make him snap, make him click to the rage and demonic lust that kind of drove him when Mioe first died. It is very misfortunate, like, that's really what it is. And to see how far he goes just to get his body part back, because for him, the reason that he almost let Dororo die was because he didn't have real arms. And that just sets him off on the deep end to say, okay, I gotta stop playing, Mr. Nice Guy, I just gotta go get my body part back, or something like this will happen again. And to see that battle play out, and to just see that once he does kill the demon, and after they merge with human and demon, this demon is one of the coolest just for the fact that it can merge with what seems to be any living life, be it animal or human. He gets nothing back. And at first I was kind of questioning, I was like, is it because like he's so lost in demonic rage, is like that's what holding him back? But we got hints throughout this episode that, the goddess statue was something that kind of saved part of her son's body. But once that was destroyed, the deal with the demons pretty much also got severed, and it seems like the one demon that didn't get to feed is now feeding on all the body parts that basically Hyakkimaru isn't regaining, and that's really interesting, especially with how they detail it. It looks like it now has the arms. So that's probably what's been happening, is that as the kind of deal got worse and worse and less strong, it pretty much seems like the one demon that didn't get to feed on Hyakkimaru's body has been taking the body parts that it kind of deems is theirs, because that is just amazing. Like, you're seeing that the way for Hyakkimaru to get what he wants, to kill the head demon as well as Dago, and just see where that goes, because that's really interesting. It answers like what's been going on. Was it just like he was killing ghouls and not demons all this time? No, it seems like he has been killing demons. It's just that one demon has been taking those body parts for itself, and that's an interesting turn of events, and just sets Hyakkimaru off on the deep end. And we're seeing that his heart is growing more and more red, this isn't the path he needs to take. Getting his body parts back, sure, you can argue that, but the way he's going about it, just that rage, the torment, that's not good, and it's going to be interesting to see where the final 4 episodes want to go for the series, because Hyakkimaru is not in a good spot right now. The man, though, for this episode, I thought was a very tragic story. He's a horrible person for just what he ultimately did, but to see where he went and just the fear that naturally consumes most people in a situation like this. Most people can't rise to the occasion and be a hero, but just seeing the fear and what it did to him, literally cutting off his mother's hand to then seeing that mother's hand still attached to him when he walked back in. Every time someone tried to help him, they just got killed by this demon to the point he snaps. Like, that's a really interesting narrative just because you don't get to see a lot with stories such as this. It's usually the more heroic side. It's usually the more this person suffered and died. You don't get to see a lot of stories where pretty much are to blame for all the misfortune that's happened to you, but you also don't think he started off as a horrible person. You can clearly see he started off as a son who loved his mother, but then faced with the devil, everything kind of goes out the window. And that's a really interesting story to tell, and just how he snapped and became so deranged and insane. I thought that was a really interesting character to kind of complement what Hyakkimaru was going through in this episode, because for him, he loves seeing, people just scream for their lives, fearful, things of that nature. And why isn't Hyakkimaru doing this? And he calls him not human in this episode. It's just the way they went about exploring Misfortune. It was really on the homeland side, seeing just what was happening to the villagers and innocent people who had nothing to do with this, but now are kind of getting screwed over in the process. You then have Hyakkimaru, who is just so hateful of himself. He's resentful because his body would have led to Dororo's death had this priest not come to him. So once again, he's bound and determined to get what is his, no matter the cost. And then you see this man who is just so tormented by the past that he's lost himself, thinking he's a horrible person. This was one of the most misfortunate episodes to this series to date, and it was absolutely incredible on the narrative level. Visually, I really liked it. There was actually quite a few beautiful scenery shots throughout this episode, especially with how they were exploring fall, but then again, when they wanted to showcase the famine, that was absolutely just gut-wrenching. It was very hard to watch people suffer in this week's episode, and just the way they went about exploring the rage, especially the blood. I really don't compliment the blood a whole lot when we see it, but I think it needs to be stated that when they go gory, when they go graphic, it actually adds a lot to the story at hand, making it feel like this is uncomfortable. We shouldn't want to see our main character do something like this, and he's losing himself and becoming those that he is hunting. And I just love how the visuals really bring out the story at hand. Second halves to Mappa series typically do have more production issues than the first half, and we have seen that with the second half of Dororo for sure, but these past couple of episodes have been just really good at selling the atmosphere at hand, whether it be last week with the comedy or this week with the dread and blood. It really got across what it needed to, and Hyakkimaru's voice actor, it's kind of funny to think about. For the first, third of this anime, he had no voice. We didn't even really recognize he had a voice actor. But this man, from how he started off just knowing a few words and grunts and sounds to full-on rage and distraught, you have to give major props to his actor. This is honestly a show that even if it got a dub, I wouldn't want to watch, just because Hyakkimaru's voice actor is so great, not to mention Dororo's, who just sells that innocent kid at hand, and I just love the acting overall, especially with the music where it goes really just, holy shit, this is the endgame, but this isn't the endgame where you're typically cheering for. This is a very dreadful endgame, where we don't know where our main character is going to go, and even if he gets his body part back, like, is he still going to be human at that point? The deal with the demons is doing some crazy shit right now, and I'm absolutely adoring just where the show is going. This, holy shit, like, I expected a darker episode, but I wasn't expecting such a story-driven episode with demons and just his body parts and just what he's becoming to then leading him back to the homeland. This is horrifying, but this is honestly some of the best content this season has seen for Dororo, and we know the next 4 episodes are going to be amazing, and just no one's going to be able to truly predict exactly where it wants to go. This is amazing. I'm really impressed by this week's episode. One of the strongest for sure. I've mentioned it a lot throughout my reviews for Dororo, is how my favorite aspect to this show is how you have this horrible deal that benefited not only a horrible person, but the lives of so many innocents while tormenting an innocent soul. And yes, there are other countries and other nations than what Dago kind of controls, and of course they're not going to do as well as him. If not, they might do worse. But any story that revolves around politics where you're focusing on one country either fighting another or just focusing on themselves, the entire point is focusing on that country at hand. This is what we're focusing on, and to see it just go so horrifying and horrible, which is not surprising if you had to deal with the demons and it didn't work out and everything went back to shit. It's still horrible to see what's happening, but at the same time, I want to feel greedy. I want to see these people thrive. I want to see the disease and just the famine just go away, stuff you can't naturally control. I want to see them prosper, but I also want to see our main character get his body part back, and I don't know if both of those are possible, even with the gold that Dororo's kind of family hid around. Like, there's so many ways they could go with this endgame. They could leave this entire country dead, just destroyed, while we watch our two characters walk off into the sunset, not knowing the future for either of them. Or there could be something more hopeful, or maybe it'll just be completely bittersweet. Like, Dororo has a really interesting endgame to explore, and I think they're going to do some interesting things down the road. I think this will be one of the more impressive Mappa series when it does conclude. Something that people are going to write home about and really recommend for years to come. Because I think you don't get to see a story like this enough, and I think this was definitely one of the more interesting series from the Godfather of manga to reinvent in a modern way. But I'm really interested in what did everyone think? What did you think of the personal stories being told, the rage that was seen from Hyakkimaru? Where do you think it's going to go next week? Let me know down in the comment section below, and if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.